The champagne flute slipped from Isabella's fingers, shattering against the marble floor as she stared at the woman who had just walked into her husband's charity gala. A woman who was supposed to be dead. "You're dead," Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible above the classical music. "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," Sophia replied, her emerald dress catching the chandelier light as she moved closer. "Though I must thank you for that little push 5 years ago. It taught me so much about survival. About patience. About the sweet, sweet taste of revenge." Isabella's face went white. "That's impossible. I watched you fall. I saw your body hit those rocks. Did you really think a fall could kill me, Isabella? Did you think pushing a pregnant woman off Devil's Ridge would solve all your problems?" Sophia's smile was razor-sharp. "Because what I did next will shock you more than my survival ever could. Have you ever wondered what it would take for someone to fake their own death? What kind of betrayal would drive a person to abandon everything they've ever known just to come back stronger? And what would happen if the person who tried to murder you discovered that not only did you survive, but you've spent 5 years systematically destroying everything they hold dear? If you're ready for a story that will challenge everything you think you know about revenge, justice, and the lengths a mother will go to protect her child, then stay with me. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe because this tale of resurrection and retribution is unlike anything you've ever heard before. This is the story of Sophia Reeves, a woman who fell from a cliff and chose to let the world believe she died that day. And of the billionaire CEO's wife who thought murder was the solution to her problems, only to discover that some women are simply too dangerous to kill. But to understand how we got to this moment of reckoning in that glittering ballroom, we need to go back 5 years. Back to when Sophia Reeves was just a 26-year-old marketing coordinator at Blackwood Industries, working late nights and dreaming of a future that seemed just out of reach. The affair began the way these things always do. Innocently. A shared elevator ride that lasted too long when the power went out. A conversation about quarterly reports that somehow turned into discussions about dreams and disappointments. Coffee meetings that stretched into dinner. Dinner that became something neither of them had planned but both desperately needed. Marcus Blackwood was everything Sophia had never allowed herself to want. Brilliant, powerful, devastatingly handsome, and completely, utterly unavailable. At 42, he had built Blackwood Industries from a small tech startup into a multinational empire worth billions. His face graced magazine covers. His business decisions moved markets. His name opened doors that most people didn't even know existed. He was also married to Isabella Chin Blackwood, the ice-cold daughter of a shipping magnate whose family connections had helped Marcus secure the international contracts that made his fortune possible. Their marriage was the kind of strategic alliance that built empires, not the kind that built happiness. "She doesn't understand me," Marcus had told Sophia one evening as they sat in his private office, the city lights twinkling below them like fallen stars. "We haven't had a real conversation in years. Everything is about appearances, about what looks good for the company, for her family's reputation." Sophia had wanted to tell him that every married man said the same thing to his mistress. That she wasn't naive enough to believe she was special. But when he looked at her with those intense gray eyes, when he spoke about his dreams of creating technology that could change the world, when he touched her face like she was something precious and fragile, all her rational thoughts scattered like leaves in the wind. "I never meant for this to happen," he whispered against her lips during their first kiss, and Sophia believed him because she had never meant for it to happen either. For 8 months, they existed in a bubble of stolen moments and secret meetings. Marcus would text her at midnight, and she would slip out of her small apartment to meet him at his penthouse. They would spend weekends at his cabin in the mountains, pretending they were just two people in love instead of a billionaire CEO and his employee conducting an affair that could destroy both their lives. Sophia told herself it was temporary. That eventually, Marcus would realize his marriage was over and file for divorce. That love would conquer all the obstacles in their path. That fairy tales could happen to girls like her who had grown up in foster care and worked 3 jobs to put themselves through college. She was wrong about almost everything. But she was right about one thing. Love would conquer all. Just not in the way she expected. The pregnancy test trembled in Sophia's hands as she stared at the two pink lines that would change everything. She was sitting on the bathroom floor of her apartment at 6 in the morning, having woken up with the kind of nausea that couldn't be explained away by stress or bad takeout. Two pink lines. Clear as day. Undeniable. She was carrying Marcus Blackwood's child. For a moment, pure joy flooded through her. A baby. Their baby. The family she had always dreamed of but never dared to hope for. She imagined telling Marcus, imagined the look of wonder on his face, imagined him finally finding the courage to leave Isabella and build a real life with her. Then reality crashed down like a tidal wave. Marcus was married. His wife's family controlled half his international business. A divorce would be messy, expensive, and potentially devastating to his empire. And a pregnant mistress? That was the kind of scandal that destroyed careers and reputations. But as Sophia sat there on her bathroom floor, one hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach, she knew with absolute certainty that she couldn't terminate this pregnancy. This child was a miracle, a gift, a chance at the love she had been searching for her entire life. She called in sick to work and spent the day walking through Central Park, trying to figure out how to tell the man she loved that their secret affair had just become infinitely more complicated. That evening, she waited for Marcus in his penthouse, pacing the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. When he finally arrived, loosening his tie and pouring himself a scotch, she could see the stress of his day written in the lines around his eyes. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Marcus looked up, immediately alert to the serious tone. "What's wrong? Did someone at the office say something? If anyone suspects about us. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Marcus froze, his glass halfway to his lips, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that might have been panic. "That's not possible," he said finally. "We've been careful. We always use protection." "Nothing is 100% effective," Sophia replied, fighting to keep her voice calm. "I took 3 tests. They were all positive." Marcus set down his glass with shaking hands and sank into his leather chair. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared out at the city lights as if they held answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally, not meeting her eyes. The question hit Sophia like a slap. Not, "What are we going to do?" or, "How do we handle this together?" "What do you want to do?" As if this was her problem alone. "I want to keep it," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "This is our child, Marcus. Our baby. You can't." The words came out sharp, desperate. "Isabella can never know. The board, the shareholders, the media. If this gets out, everything I've built will crumble. My marriage, my company, my reputation. Everything. So what are you saying?" Sophia's voice was dangerously quiet. Marcus finally looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. Not love. Not even regret. Just calculation. "I'm saying you have to get rid of it," he said. "I'll pay for everything. The best doctors, a private clinic, whatever you need. But this pregnancy cannot continue." The words hit Sophia like physical blows. This was the man she had fallen in love with. The man she had believed would choose her over everything else. The man who was now asking her to destroy their child to protect his precious empire. "Get out," she whispered. "Sophia, be reasonable." "Get out," she screamed, her composure finally cracking. "Get out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret." Marcus stood slowly, straightening his tie with the same mechanical precision he used in board meetings. "Think about what I said. Really think about it. This is the only way." After he left, Sophia collapsed on his couch and cried until she had no tears left. Then she went home to her small apartment and began planning for a future that no longer included Marcus Blackwood. She was wrong about that too. 3 days later, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end was unmistakably familiar. Cold, cultured, and sharp as a blade. "Miss Reeves? This is Isabella Blackwood. I believe we need to have a conversation." Sophia's blood turned to ice. "Mrs. Blackwood. I don't think we have anything to discuss." "Oh, but we do." Isabella's laugh was like breaking glass. "We have quite a lot to discuss, actually. About your relationship with my husband. About your current condition. About the choices you're going to make in the very near future." The line went quiet except for the sound of Sophia's heart hammering against her ribs. How did Isabella know? Had Marcus told her? Had someone seen them together? "I don't know what you're talking about," Sophia said, but her voice betrayed her. "Please don't insult my intelligence, Miss Reeves. I've known about your little affair for months. I know about the late-night meetings, the weekend trips to the cabin, the way my husband looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. And now I know about the pregnancy test you bought 3 days ago." Sophia's legs gave out, and she sank onto her couch. How do I know? Because I make it my business to know everything that could threaten my family's interests. And you, my dear, have become quite the threat. The casual way Isabella discussed surveillance, the matter-of-fact tone as she revealed the extent of her knowledge, made Sophia's skin crawl. This wasn't a wronged wife confronting her husband's mistress. This was a predator circling its prey. "What do you want?" Sophia asked. "I want to meet. Face to face. Woman to woman. There are things we need to discuss that can't be said over the phone. I'm not meeting you anywhere." "Oh, but you are." Isabella's voice hardened. "Because if you don't, I'll make sure that everyone knows about your affair. Your colleagues, your friends, your landlord, your bank. I'll destroy your reputation so thoroughly that you'll never work in this city again. And then I'll make sure Marcus fires you for violating company policy regarding relationships between supervisors and subordinates." The threat was delivered with such casual cruelty that Sophia felt physically sick. "You can't do that." "Can't I? I'm Isabella Chin Blackwood. My family owns shipping companies, real estate empires, and more politicians than you could count. Destroying one insignificant little secretary is barely worth my time. But I'll do it if you force my hand." Sophia closed her eyes, feeling trapped in a nightmare with no escape. "Where do you want to meet?" "Devil's Ridge. Tomorrow at sunset. Come alone, and Miss Reeves. Don't even think about recording this conversation or bringing backup. I'll know if you do, and the consequences will be severe." The line went dead, leaving Sophia staring at her phone in horror. Devil's Ridge was a remote cliff overlooking the Pacific, about an hour's drive from the city. It was beautiful, isolated, and completely deserted at sunset. It was also the perfect place for someone to disappear. Sophia spent that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out her options. She could run, pack up everything and leave the city before Isabella could make good on her threats. But where would she go? She had no family, limited savings, and a baby on the way. Running would mean starting over with nothing. She could go to Marcus, tell him about his wife's threats, and hope he would protect her. But Marcus had already made his position clear. The pregnancy was a problem to be eliminated, not a child to be protected. She could go to the police, but what would she tell them? That her married lover's wife wanted to meet her at a cliff? That she felt threatened by a phone call? Isabella was right about one thing. The Chin Blackwood family had connections everywhere. Who would believe Sophia's word against theirs? In the end, she decided to go to the meeting. Not because she trusted Isabella, but because she needed to understand what she was up against. She needed to look her enemy in the eye and figure out how to protect herself and her unborn child. She was walking into a trap, and she knew it. But sometimes, when you're backed into a corner with no way out, the only choice is to face the danger head-on and hope you're strong enough to survive it. The next evening, Sophia drove her beat-up Honda along the winding coastal road toward Devil's Ridge. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Now, they just looked ominous, like a warning of the blood that was about to be spilled. She parked at the small gravel lot at the base of the hiking trail and began the 20-minute climb to the cliff's edge. Her heart was pounding, whether from exertion or fear, she couldn't tell. Every step took her further from safety, further from help, further from any chance of escape if things went wrong. Isabella was already there when Sophia reached the top, standing near the edge of the cliff with her back to the trail. She was dressed in an elegant black coat that probably cost more than Sophia made in 6 months, her dark hair pulled back in a perfect chignon that didn't move despite the ocean breeze. She turned when she heard Sophia's footsteps, and for the first time, they faced each other as equals. No corporate hierarchy, no social pretenses, just two women whose lives had become fatally intertwined because of one man's weakness. "Miss Reeves," Isabella said, her voice carrying easily over the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't entirely sure you would." "Let's get this over with," Sophia replied, staying well back from the cliff's edge. "What do you want?" Isabella smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Straight to the point." "I can respect that. What I want is simple. I want you to disappear. If you mean leave the city, I mean disappear completely. New name, new life, new identity. Somewhere far away where you can never threaten my family again." Sophia stared at her in disbelief. "You're insane. I can't just disappear. I have a job, an apartment, a life here. A life that's about to become very unpleasant if you don't take my generous offer." Isabella began walking slowly around Sophia, like a shark circling its prey. "You see, I've done my research on you, Miss Reeves. Sophia Marie Reeves, age 26, born in Detroit to parents who died in a car accident when you were 8. Raised in foster care, bounced between 6 different families before aging out of the system at 18. No siblings, no extended family, no one who would miss you if you simply vanished one day." The casual recitation of her tragic history made Sophia's skin crawl. "You don't know anything about me. Don't I? I know you worked 3 jobs to put yourself through community college. I know you've been sending money to your former foster mother who's in a nursing home with dementia. I know you have exactly $4,237 in your savings account and $17,000 in student loan debt." Each fact hit Sophia like a physical blow. The depth of Isabella's investigation was terrifying, but more than that, it revealed just how alone she really was. Isabella was right. There was no one who would miss her if she disappeared. Except for the child growing inside her. "I'm not disappearing," Sophia said, her hand moving protectively to her stomach. "And I'm not getting rid of my baby just because it's inconvenient for you." Isabella's eyes followed the gesture, and her expression hardened. "Ah yes, the pregnancy. Marcus told me about your little ultimatum. How you're planning to use that child to trap him, to force him to leave me and destroy everything we've built together. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it?" Isabella's voice rose, her careful composure finally cracking. "You think you can waltz into my life, seduce my husband, get yourself pregnant, and then demand that he abandon his family, his company, his entire legacy for some nobody secretary who spreads her legs for married men?" The vicious words hit Sophia like slaps, but she forced herself to stand tall. "I love him. And he loves me." "Love?" Isabella laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "You stupid little girl. Marcus doesn't love you. He loves the idea of you. The fantasy of a young, adoring woman who thinks he's a hero instead of the ruthless businessman he really is. You were a distraction, a midlife crisis, a way to feel young and powerful again. But love? Real love? That requires sacrifice, commitment, building something together over years and decades. Not sneaking around hotel rooms like teenagers. You're wrong, Sophia said, but doubt was creeping into her voice. He told me he was going to leave you. He said your marriage was over. My marriage has been over for years, Isabella replied coldly. But it's also a business partnership worth billions of dollars. My family's shipping empire, Marcus's technology companies, the political connections we've built together. Do you really think he would throw all of that away for a pregnant secretary? The question hung in the air between them, and Sophia realized with growing horror that she didn't know the answer. The Marcus she had fallen in love with, the man who spoke passionately about changing the world, who held her like she was precious beyond measure, would choose love over money. But the Marcus who had told her to get rid of it when she revealed her pregnancy? That man might choose his empire over everything else. It doesn't matter, Sophia said, trying to convince herself as much as Isabella. I'm keeping my baby. With or without Marcus. No, Isabella said quietly, you're not. Something in her tone made Sophia look up sharply. Isabella had stopped circling and was now standing directly between Sophia and the path back down the cliff. Her elegant coat was open, revealing not just her designer dress, but also something that made Sophia's blood freeze. Sophia's mind went blank with terror. This wasn't a confrontation or a negotiation. This was an execution. You're insane, she whispered, backing away from Isabella and closer to the cliff's edge. You can't just murder me. People will ask questions. Marcus will know what you did. Will he? A depressed young woman, pregnant and abandoned by her married lover, drives to a remote cliff and throws herself off in despair. It's tragic, really. But not entirely surprising given the circumstances. Isabella was still advancing, forcing Sophia backward step by step. The sound of waves crashing against rocks grew louder as they approached the edge. Marcus will never forgive you for this, Sophia said desperately. When he finds out what you did. Marcus will never know what I did. He'll think you killed yourself because he rejected you. He might even feel guilty about it for a while. But guilt fades, Miss Reeves. Business partnerships are forever. Sophia's heel hit empty air, and she realized with horror that she was at the very edge of the cliff. One more step backward and she would fall into the darkness below. The rocks were at least 200 feet down, jagged and unforgiving. No one could survive that fall. Please, she whispered, one hand on her stomach, the other reaching out toward Isabella in supplication. Please don't do this. I'll disappear, I promise. I'll leave the city, change my name, never contact Marcus again. Just please don't hurt my baby. For a moment, something flickered in Isabella's eyes. Not mercy, exactly, but perhaps a recognition of the desperation in Sophia's voice. Then it was gone, replaced by cold determination. It's too late for that, Isabella said. You should have taken my offer when you had the chance. She raised the gun, and Sophia saw her own death reflected in the barrel. Time seemed to slow as Isabella's finger tightened on the trigger. Sophia closed her eyes and thought of the child she would never hold, the life she would never live, the love she had believed in that had led her to this moment of ultimate betrayal. But instead of a gunshot, she heard something else. A voice, sharp with authority and completely unexpected. Isabella. What the hell are you doing? Both women turned toward the sound, and Sophia's heart nearly stopped. Marcus was standing at the edge of the clearing, his face white with shock as he took in the scene before him. His wife holding a gun on his pregnant mistress at the edge of a cliff. Marcus, Isabella said, not lowering the weapon. You shouldn't be here. Put the gun down, Isabella. Now. I'm solving our problem, she replied calmly. The problem you were too weak to handle yourself. Marcus took a step forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. This isn't the way. We can figure something else out. We can. We can what? Pay her off. Hope she keeps quiet. Wait for her to demand more money, more attention, more of your time and energy. Isabella's voice was rising again, the careful control slipping. She's carrying your child, Marcus. Your heir. Do you really think she'll just disappear quietly and let us pretend this never happened? I don't know, Marcus said honestly. But I know that murder isn't the answer. Isn't it? One little push, and all our problems disappear. The affair, the pregnancy, the threat to everything we've built. Clean, simple, final. Sophia watched this exchange with growing horror. They were talking about her murder like it was a business decision. Like she was a problem to be solved rather than a human being with hopes and dreams and a child growing inside her. I won't let you do this, Marcus said, taking another step forward. Isabella swung the gun toward him. Don't come any closer, Marcus. I've worked too hard to let you destroy everything because you can't keep your pants zipped. Isabella, please. No. I'm done being the understanding wife. Done pretending I don't know about your affairs, your lies, your complete disregard for our marriage vows. This ends tonight. She turned back toward Sophia, raising the gun again. But in that moment of distraction, Marcus lunged forward, grabbing for the weapon. The two of them struggled, Isabella screaming in fury as Marcus tried to wrestle the gun away from her. Sophia saw her chance and ran. Not toward the path, which was blocked by the fighting couple, but along the cliff's edge, looking for another way down or at least a place to hide until help arrived. Behind her, she heard the gun go off. Once, then twice. She spun around to see Marcus on the ground, blood spreading across his white shirt, while Isabella stood over him with the smoking weapon in her hands. Marcus! Sophia screamed, starting back toward him. Isabella looked up at the sound, her face twisted with rage and something that might have been madness. This is all your fault, she snarled. All of it. If you had just stayed away from my husband, none of this would have happened. She raised the gun again, and this time, Sophia knew there would be no rescue. No last-minute intervention. Just death on a lonely cliff as the sun set over the Pacific. But as Isabella's finger tightened on the trigger, Sophia made a choice that would change everything. Instead of standing there waiting to die, she turned and ran straight toward the cliff's edge. If she was going to die tonight, it would be on her terms. Not Isabella's. She heard Isabella scream behind her, heard the gun fire again, felt the bullet whistle past her ear. And then she was falling, the wind rushing past her face as the rocky shore rushed up to meet her. Her last coherent thought before she hit the water was a prayer. Not for herself, but for the child she carried. Let the baby survive. Let something good come from this nightmare. Let her death not be completely meaningless. Then the cold Pacific swallowed her whole, and Sophia Reeve ceased to exist. But sometimes, death is just another beginning. And sometimes, the woman who falls is not the same one who rises from the depths, transformed by pain into something far more dangerous than her enemies ever imagined. The real story was just beginning. If you're as shocked by this twist as I am, make sure to hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think Isabella's next move will be. Because trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. But first, we need to see how Sophia's miraculous survival sets the stage for the most elaborate revenge plot you've ever heard. The water was like liquid ice, shocking Sophia's system as she plunged beneath the surface. The impact with the Pacific should have killed her instantly, but fate had other plans. Instead of hitting the jagged rocks that lined most of Devil's Ridge, she had fallen into a narrow channel of deep water that cut between the stone formations. Still, the fall had broken 3 ribs, shattered her left wrist, and left her with a concussion that made the world spin like a carnival ride. As she fought to stay conscious in the churning waves, one thought burned through the pain and confusion. The baby. She had to protect the baby. Somehow, through sheer force of will and the kind of maternal instinct that defies logic, Sophia managed to grab onto a piece of driftwood and let the current carry her away from Devil's Ridge. Away from Isabella's gun. Away from Marcus's bleeding body. Away from the life she had known and into something entirely new. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been hiking the coastal trail when she heard the gunshots echoing off the cliffs. As a trauma surgeon at San Francisco General, she recognized the sound immediately and knew someone was in serious trouble. She had grabbed her emergency medical kit from her car and was making her way toward the sound when she spotted something in the water below. A woman, barely conscious, clinging to a piece of wood as the waves battered her against the rocks. Elena didn't hesitate. She called 911, then scrambled down the treacherous cliff face to reach the water's edge. By the time she pulled Sophia from the Pacific, the younger woman was hypothermic, bleeding, and barely breathing. "Please," Sophia whispered through blue lips as Elena worked to stabilize her injuries. "Don't let them know I survived. Please." Elena had seen enough domestic violence cases to recognize the desperation in those words. This wasn't an accident. This was attempted murder, and whoever had tried to kill this woman might try again if they knew she was alive. "What's your name?" Elena asked as she wrapped Sophia in emergency blankets. "I'm nobody," Sophia replied, her eyes already closing as shock set in. "I'm dead. Let me stay dead." Elena made a decision that would change both their lives forever. When the paramedics arrived, she told them she had found an unidentified woman who appeared to have fallen from the cliffs. No ID, no personal effects, no way to determine who she was. The woman was unconscious and couldn't provide any information about herself. At the hospital, Sophia became Jane Doe, a mystery patient with no past and an uncertain future. Elena used her position as head of trauma surgery to ensure that Sophia's case was handled with complete discretion. No media attention, no police investigation beyond a standard accident report, no questions that might lead back to Isabella Blackwood and her smoking gun. For 6 weeks, Sophia drifted in and out of consciousness as her body slowly healed. The baby, miraculously, had survived the fall and the trauma. Elena monitored the pregnancy carefully, amazed by the resilience of both mother and child. When Sophia finally woke up fully, Elena was sitting beside her bed, reading a medical journal in the soft light of the hospital room. "How long?" Sophia asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. 6 weeks, Elena replied, setting down her journal. "You've been in and out, but this is the first time you've been truly lucid." Sophia's hand immediately went to her stomach, and Elena smiled. "The baby's fine. Strong heartbeat, normal development. Whatever else happened to you, your child is a fighter." Tears streamed down Sophia's face as relief flooded through her. "I thought I'd lost everything." "You lost your old life," Elena said gently. "But sometimes that's the only way to find your new one. The question is, what do you want that new life to look like?" Over the following weeks, as Sophia's body continued to heal, Elena became more than her doctor. She became her confidant, her protector, and eventually, her friend. Elena had her own tragic history, having lost her husband and daughter in a drunk driving accident 5 years earlier. She understood the need to start over, to build something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. "I can't go back," Sophia told her one evening as they sat on the deck of Elena's remote cabin, where Sophia was recovering away from prying eyes. "Even if I wanted to, Isabella would just try to kill me again. And Marcus." She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "What about Marcus?" Elena asked gently. "I don't know if he's alive or dead. I saw Isabella shoot him, saw him fall. But I don't know what happened after I jumped." Sophia's voice was hollow with grief and uncertainty. Elena had been monitoring the news carefully, looking for any reports about Marcus Blackwood. What she had found was disturbing. Marcus had survived the shooting, but barely. He had been found on Devil's Ridge with 2 gunshot wounds and a story about being attacked by an unknown assailant. Isabella had been there too, claiming she had arrived just after the attack and scared off the shooter. The official story was that Marcus had gone to Devil's Ridge to meet with a business associate who had turned out to be working for a competitor. The associate had tried to kill Marcus and steal sensitive company information, but Isabella's unexpected arrival had saved her husband's life. There was no mention of Sophia Reeves. No missing person report, no investigation into her disappearance. It was as if she had never existed at all. "He's alive," Elena told Sophia carefully. "But he's not looking for you. As far as the world knows, you were never there that night." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. Marcus had chosen to protect Isabella, to go along with whatever story she had concocted, rather than tell the truth about what had happened. He had let the world believe that Sophia had simply vanished, that their affair and her pregnancy had never mattered at all. "Then Sophia Reeves really is dead," she said quietly. "And good riddance. She was weak, naive, and stupid enough to believe in fairy tales." "So who are you going to be instead?" Elena asked. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the ocean that had nearly claimed her life but had ultimately set her free. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Harder. More determined. "I'm going to be someone they never see coming." The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took months of careful planning, strategic thinking, and the kind of patience that only comes from having nothing left to lose. Elena helped her create a new identity, complete with a social security number, birth certificate, and educational credentials that would stand up to scrutiny. Victoria Sterling was born from the ashes of Sophia Reeves. Brilliant, mysterious, and wealthy thanks to a carefully constructed backstory involving a deceased tech entrepreneur father and a series of successful early investments in cryptocurrency. Elena's connections in the medical community helped establish Victoria's credentials as a venture capitalist with an uncanny ability to predict market trends. But Victoria's real education came from studying her enemies. She spent hours researching Marcus and Isabella, learning everything about their business empire, their personal lives, their weaknesses and vulnerabilities. She studied corporate law, hostile takeovers, and the kind of financial warfare that could destroy companies from within. Most importantly, she learned patience. Real revenge wasn't about immediate gratification. It was about playing the long game, building power slowly and methodically until you were strong enough to strike with devastating effect. Arya was born on a stormy night in February, 6 months after the fall that had changed everything. She was perfect, beautiful, and completely innocent of the circumstances that had brought her into the world. As Sophia held her daughter for the first time, she made a vow that would drive everything she did for the next 5 years. "I will never let anyone hurt you," she whispered against the baby's soft hair. "And I will make sure that the people who tried to destroy us pay for what they did." Elena became Arya's godmother and the closest thing to family that either of them had. She helped Sophia navigate the challenges of single motherhood while building her new identity and planning her revenge. "Are you sure about this?" Elena asked one evening as they watched 2-year-old Arya play with her toys. "Revenge is a dangerous game, Sophia. It can consume you if you're not careful." "It's not revenge," Sophia replied, her eyes never leaving her daughter. "It's justice. And protection. As long as Marcus and Isabella are out there, as long as they have power and influence, Arya will never be safe. They tried to kill her before she was even born. What do you think they'll do if they ever find out she survived?" Elena couldn't argue with that logic. Isabella had proven herself capable of murder to protect her interests. If she ever discovered that Sophia and her child were alive, she would undoubtedly try to finish what she had started on Devil's Ridge. So Sophia began her campaign of systematic destruction, using Victoria Sterling as her weapon of choice. She started small, identifying companies in Marcus's supply chain that were struggling financially. Victoria Sterling would swoop in with offers of investment, gradually gaining controlling interests and then making strategic decisions that would hurt Blackwood Industries. A shipping company that handled Marcus's international logistics suddenly found itself with new management that prioritized other clients. A software firm that provided crucial technology to Blackwood Industries was acquired and then had its contracts mysteriously terminated. A manufacturing plant that produced components for Marcus's products was sold to a competitor who immediately raised prices. Each move was legal, carefully planned, and devastating in its cumulative effect. Marcus's profit margins began to shrink. His stock price started to decline. His business partners began to question his leadership as deal after deal fell through for reasons that seemed to make no sense. But Victoria Sterling was just getting started. She began targeting Marcus's personal investments next. The art collection he was so proud of. Victoria outbid him at every auction, driving up prices and then donating the pieces to museums where Marcus could see them but never own them. The exclusive country club where he conducted business. Victoria bought a controlling interest and had him blacklisted for conduct unbecoming a member. The yacht he used for entertaining clients. Victoria purchased the marina where it was docked and then implemented new policies that made it impossible for Marcus to keep his boat there. The private jet he used for business travel. Victoria bought the company that serviced it and then discovered safety violations that grounded the aircraft indefinitely. Each attack was surgical, precise, and completely untraceable back to Sophia Reeves. Victoria Sterling was a ghost, a phantom investor who seemed to appear wherever Marcus's interests were vulnerable and then disappear just as quickly, leaving destruction in her wake. But the most devastating blow came when Victoria began targeting Isabella's family business. The Chin shipping empire had been built over 3 generations, and Isabella was fiercely proud of her family's legacy. She was also completely unprepared for the kind of corporate warfare that Victoria Sterling specialized in. It started with a series of labor disputes at Chin Shipping's major ports. Workers who had been loyal to the company for decades suddenly began demanding better wages and working conditions. When Isabella refused to negotiate, the strikes began. Then came the regulatory investigations. Environmental groups, seemingly out of nowhere, began filing complaints about Chin Shipping's practices. Government agencies that had previously ignored minor violations suddenly became very interested in conducting thorough inspections. Insurance companies began raising premiums, citing increased risks in the shipping industry. Banks became reluctant to extend credit, worried about the company's long-term viability. Clients began looking for alternative shipping options, concerned about potential delays and disruptions. Within 2 years, Chin Shipping was hemorrhaging money and facing bankruptcy. Isabella was forced to sell off assets, lay off workers, and watch her family's empire crumble piece by piece. She never suspected that the mysterious Victoria Sterling, who seemed to benefit from every one of Chin Shipping's misfortunes, was actually the woman she had tried to murder 5 years earlier. Marcus, meanwhile, was facing his own crisis. Blackwood Industries was still profitable, but barely. The company's stock price had fallen by 60%. Major clients were defecting to competitors. The board of directors was beginning to question his leadership. "I don't understand what's happening," he confided to Isabella one evening as they sat in their penthouse, surrounded by the luxury that their combined empires had built. "It's like someone is systematically targeting everything we've worked for." Isabella, who was dealing with her own business disasters, had no answers. "Maybe it's just bad luck. The economy, market forces, competition." "This isn't bad luck," Marcus replied grimly. "This is warfare. Someone is coming after us, and they're very good at it." He was right, of course. But he would never have guessed that his enemy was a woman he believed to be dead, a woman whose child he had told her to abort, a woman who had spent 5 years building the power necessary to destroy him. The final phase of Sophia's plan began with a charity gala. Marcus, desperate to rehabilitate his image and attract new investors, had organized a fundraising event for disadvantaged children. The irony wasn't lost on Sophia. The man who had abandoned his own child was now trying to use other people's children to save his reputation. Victoria Sterling received an invitation, of course. She was now one of the most successful venture capitalists on the West Coast, exactly the kind of investor Marcus needed to court. He had no idea that he was inviting his own destruction to dinner. Sophia spent weeks preparing for the gala. She had her hair styled, bought the perfect dress, and practiced the speech she would give when she finally revealed herself. This would be her moment of triumph, the culmination of 5 years of careful planning and patient revenge. But as she stood in front of her mirror on the night of the gala, adjusting her emerald silk dress and checking her makeup one last time, she felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction or anticipation, but a strange kind of sadness. The woman in the mirror was beautiful, powerful, and successful. She had built an empire from nothing, raised a brilliant daughter, and was about to achieve the revenge she had dreamed of for 5 years. But she was also alone, isolated by the secrets she carried and the lies she had told. "Mommy, you look pretty," Arya said from the doorway, dressed in her pajamas and ready for bed. Sophia turned and knelt down to hug her daughter, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "Thank you, sweetheart. Elena's going to stay with you tonight while Mommy goes to work. Will you tell me about it tomorrow?" Arya asked. "I'll tell you everything," Sophia promised, and she meant it. After tonight, there would be no more secrets, no more lies, no more hiding. Arya would finally know the truth about who her father was and why they had lived in the shadows for so long. The charity gala was everything Sophia had expected. Elegant, expensive, and full of the kind of people who measured their worth in dollars and social connections. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting compliments on her success and deflecting questions about her mysterious past. Marcus was holding court near the auction stage, surrounded by potential investors and hangers-on who hoped to benefit from his connections. He looked older than his 47 years, the stress of his recent business failures evident in the lines around his eyes and the gray threading through his dark hair. Isabella stood beside him, playing the role of the supportive wife with the same cold perfection she brought to everything else. She was still beautiful, still elegant, but there was a brittleness to her now that hadn't been there 5 years ago. The destruction of her family's business had taken its toll. Sophia watched them for a long moment, these two people who had shaped her life in such devastating ways. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by their recent failures and the fear that someone was hunting them. They were right to be afraid. Sophia picked up a champagne flute from a passing waiter and began walking toward them, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the rhythm of a countdown. Other guests moved aside to let her pass, recognizing her as someone important even if they couldn't quite place her. She was 10 feet away when Isabella looked up and saw her. The champagne flute slipped from Isabella's fingers, shattering against the marble floor as recognition dawned in her eyes. "Impossible," Isabella whispered, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her throat where a diamond necklace suddenly felt like a noose. The sound of breaking glass drew Marcus's attention, and he turned to see what had caused his wife's distress. When his eyes met Sophia's across the glittering ballroom, his face went white with shock. "Sophia," he breathed, the name barely audible above the classical music. "Hello, Marcus," Sophia said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet that had fallen around them. "Miss me?" The confrontation that followed was everything Sophia had dreamed of and more. The revelation that Victoria Sterling was actually Sophia Reeve sent shockwaves through the crowd. The disclosure that she had spent 5 years systematically destroying their empires was met with gasps of amazement and horror. But the moment that gave Sophia the most satisfaction was when she revealed the truth about what had happened on Devil's Ridge 5 years ago. Isabella's face crumbled as Sophia played the recording she had made of their phone conversation, the one where Isabella had threatened to destroy her life if she didn't agree to meet at the cliff. "You vindictive little bitch," Isabella snarled, her mask of composure finally slipping completely. "You think you can destroy us? We'll have you arrested for fraud, for what?" Sophia interrupted, her voice deadly calm. "For surviving your murder attempt. For building a legitimate business empire. For being better at your husband's own game than he is." She gestured to Agent Morrison, who stepped forward from the crowd with his badge gleaming in the chandelier light. "Isabella Blackwood, you're under arrest for attempted murder and insurance fraud." As the handcuffs clicked around Isabella's wrists, Sophia felt a strange sense of completion. Not satisfaction, exactly, but a kind of closure that she hadn't expected. The woman who had tried to kill her was finally facing justice. But her business with Marcus wasn't finished yet. "You want to know the best part?" she whispered, moving close enough that only he could hear. "Our daughter, yes, she survived too. She's been watching from the balcony this whole time. Learning what happens to people who think they can destroy others without consequences." Marcus's gaze shot upward to where Arya stood watching from the mezzanine level, her dark hair and intelligent eyes marking her unmistakably as his child. "Arya," he breathed, the name carrying all the weight of 5 years of regret and loss. "She knows who you are," Sophia continued softly. "She knows what you chose when you told me to get rid of her. She knows that you never once looked for me after I died. And she knows that the only reason she has a roof over her head and food in her belly is because her mother clawed her way back from hell to provide for her." Sophia stepped back, her voice rising so the crowd could hear. "Blackwood Industries is finished, Marcus. I own your debt, your assets, and your reputation. But I'm not completely heartless. I'll give you a choice, the same choice you gave me 5 years ago." The ballroom was dead silent, every eye fixed on the unfolding drama. "You can disappear," Sophia continued. "Leave the country, start over somewhere else with nothing but the clothes on your back. Or you can stay and face the consequences of every illegal deal, every bribe, every corner you've cut that I've spent 5 years documenting." Marcus looked around the room at the faces of people who had once respected him, feared him, courted his favor. Now they watched his destruction with the fascination of spectators at a gladiator match. "Why?" he asked, his voice broken. "Why not just kill me? It would have been easier." Sophia's smile was cold as winter. "Because death would have been mercy. And mercy is something I learned to live without the day your wife pushed me off that cliff." She turned to leave, then paused, looking back over her shoulder. "Oh, and Marcus? The charity you're supposedly raising money for tonight? The one for disadvantaged children? I bought it last month. Every dollar raised tonight will actually go to helping kids who've been abandoned by their fathers. I thought you'd appreciate the irony." As Sophia walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, the crowd parted before her like the Red Sea. She had come back from the dead not as a victim, but as an avenging angel who had turned her pain into power and her suffering into strength. Behind her, Marcus Blackwood, once one of the most powerful men in the city, stood alone in the ruins of his empire, finally understanding that some falls are survivable, and some women are unbreakable. The last thing he heard before the FBI agents approached him was the sound of his daughter's laughter drifting down from the balcony above, bright, clear, and utterly without forgiveness. 3 months later, Marcus chose exile over prison. He liquidated his remaining assets, paid his legal fees, and disappeared to a small island in the Caribbean where extradition treaties were more suggestions than requirements. Isabella was serving 15 years in federal prison, her family's shipping empire sold off to pay legal fees and restitution. Sophia, meanwhile, had emerged from the shadows completely. The story of Victoria Sterling's true identity had made international headlines, turning her into a symbol of resilience and justice. Business schools taught case studies about her corporate warfare tactics. Women's groups invited her to speak about overcoming adversity. Publishers offered her millions for her autobiography. But the victory felt hollow in ways she hadn't expected. She had achieved everything she had set out to do, destroyed her enemies completely, and secured her daughter's future. So why did she feel so empty? The answer came to her one evening as she sat on the deck of her yacht, watching Arya practice violin as the sun set over the Pacific. Her daughter was brilliant, talented, and completely unaware of the darkness that had shaped her early years. She played with the kind of joy that only comes from a childhood filled with love and security. "Mom," Arya said, lowering her instrument. "Do you ever regret it? What you did to Dad?" The question caught Sophia off guard. They had talked about Marcus before, about why he wasn't part of their lives, but Arya had never asked about regret. "No, sweetheart," Sophia said finally. "I regret that it was necessary. But I don't regret protecting us, or showing the world that some people are too dangerous to underestimate." Arya nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can we go swimming before dinner?" "Of course," Sophia laughed, watching her daughter race toward the water with the fearless joy of a child who had never known what it meant to be powerless. As she watched Arya dive into the crystal-clear water, Sophia realized that her revenge had never really been about destroying Marcus and Isabella. It had been about building something beautiful and strong and unshakable for her daughter. It had been about proving that love, real love, was more powerful than greed or ambition or the kind of casual cruelty that had nearly destroyed them both. She had died on those cliffs 5 years ago. But the woman who had risen from those waters was something far more dangerous than Isabella Blackwood had ever imagined, a mother with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. And that, as it turned out, was the most powerful force in the world. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't about destroying your enemies. They're about building something so beautiful, so strong, so unshakable that your enemies can only watch from the shadows and wonder what might have been if they had chosen love over cruelty, mercy over malice. Sophia Reeves had learned that lesson the hard way. But she had learned it completely, and in the end, that made all the difference. If this story of survival, transformation, and ultimate triumph moved you, remember that sometimes our greatest defeats become the foundation for our most spectacular victories. The woman who falls may not be the same one who rises, and that transformation can be the most powerful weapon of all. Don't forget to like this video if Sophia's journey inspired you, subscribe for more incredible stories of resilience and justice, and share this with someone who needs to hear that no matter how far you fall, you can always choose to rise again. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction, it's building a life so extraordinary that your enemies can only watch in amazement and regret. What would you have done in Sophia's situation? Let me know in the comments below, and remember, every ending is just a new beginning in disguise.